Hey guys, welcome back. So today we are going to look at the process on how to use MariaBackup and create a fresh backup from one of the servers that you may have in your cluster and add a new node to your existing cluster. So let's say you have a 3 node cluster or a 2 node cluster that is currently running. Like in this case, for example, I'm going to continue using the same servers that we did in the past videos. So we have a max scale node and then you have 2 servers that is currently running. So I've just added a third node here. This is completely empty. So we have our original 2 node master slave setup that is currently working, and we are going to take a backup from one of these nodes and then restore that backup onto this node and add it up as a replica to whichever master is currently available on the setup. So I have already created those sessions here. So if you look at it, so we have the same setup. We have primary replica, and then we have this 71 which is running as a master, and then we have 72 which is running as a slave or a replica node. So this is our master server, and then this is our replica node at the moment. Alright, so the first thing is first, let's verify that you have MariaBackup already installed in your server. So if you follow the guides that I've created earlier, we will see how you can get MariaBackup installed. But just doing a quick follow up on that. So we have the same folder here, cd. So this is basically just the rpm tar file that we downloaded from mariadb.com official image, and it is, of course, it's a community build. Is not the enterprise server, is the community build, but the process is exactly the same regardless of whether it's a community version or enterprise version. So if you check the contents, you will see that there should be one file called mariabackup.rpm. So once you have the server already installed, you can just simply yum install mariabackup blah 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 .rpm files, and then it will basically get installed. So we can verify here on our setup. I'm going to go back to the home folder. So rpm-qa grep -i, and then we'll check for MariaDB. Let's see. And yes, we have MariaBackup already installed, along with, of course, all the other required RPMs. So we are sure that we have MariaBackup available on this node, and of course it should be available on the other node as well. Grab this MariaDB. Yep, and of course it is. All right, so what are the requirements for creating a backup? Of course, you can use the root user, the database, the DB root, not the OS root user. We are talking about the DB root user, or any user with all privileges or super privileges. You should be able to create a backup, but based on the best practices, we need to have a dedicated user. That the sole purpose of that user would be to basically take backups of the database. Right. So if you go to the MariaDB knowledge base, I'm going to search MariaDB KB for knowledge base and then MariaBackup. So when you search that, you will see that we have this MariaBackup knowledge base. So you'll just click on this link to get to the MariaDB backup knowledge base article. So if you go to, so first you will see that we have all the options available, and like how to take a full backup, how to take an incremental backup, partial backup, restoring individual tables and whatnot. So everything that you can think of is already covered here in this documentation, but just for the sake of it, so we'll click on this overview just to see what are the basic requirements. So of course you need to, if you are using yum repositories, then you can just simply say install, so it will download from the MariaDB server and get it installed, not a problem at all. But we are looking for something specific. Yeah, there it is. So authentication and privileges. So you need to create a user. The username can be anything. but in this case it's a MariaBackup user, and then the host name should be a local host, because this backup can only run locally on the server. You cannot take a backup from a remote machine, so you cannot, it will not work basically. So the backup will always be done on the server itself, on the DB server itself. That's why this user is supposed to be a local host user and nothing else. So once the user is created, we need to give some specific privileges. One of them is reload, then of course to get access to the processes, and then of course this user should be able to apply some table level logs, and then replication clients to check what is the replication status. So all those things are required for this specific user. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we are going to go back, and since our master is 71, so I am host name, so this is 71. I'm going to connect to this node directly, but of course if you have MaxScale, then the advised method of doing it is to connect to your servers through MaxScale, so that MaxScale will always send your writes to the master node, whichever that may be. So you don't need to worry about that part at all, because in this case if you accidentally connect to a slave and then create a user over there, then your GTIDs will go out of sync, right? So that's going to break your replication. That's something that we have already discussed in the previous sessions, but for now we are just going to connect to MariaDB. As always, we are going to verify our username, which is root of course, and then we are going to create user. So I'm going to create a user with the name backup at localhost, of course, identified by our very secure and secret password. So the user is created. Then let's take a quick look at the grants. So we need reload process table log. So I'm just going to copy this text from here, and we will fill in the username later. So all those grants, all these specific grants are required on star.star, meaning all the tables, all the databases, and all the objects within those databases will have access, or rather this user will have access to all those things. So this things to our backup user at localhost. Okay, so the grants are done. If we do a very quick check, show grants for backup at localhost, and we'll see all those grants in place. So we have a user with a password, and then of course with those specific grants that we wanted. So we are going to quit from here. So that's all there is. That's all we need to do on the database, on the master node itself. The data should have been created, and then this user should have been replicated already to my replica node. So if I connect to my database console, this is my slave, of course, show slave status. I can see that my GDID is 291, which is of course in sync with this MaxScale, whatever MaxScale is reporting, which is good. And just to verify, I have no errors. My replication 2 threads are working fine, and I got no errors. Yeah, no errors and no SQL errors and no IO errors. So all looks good. So if I do a quick check on the slave node to see whether this user exists or not, and yes, indeed, as expected, the user is already replicated to this slave node, and then is available. So we can take a backup from any of these nodes. Generally, we would take a backup from the slave node because we don't want to disturb the master node, and we try not to disturb the master node as much as possible, so that all the writes and everything can go through without any blockage or any kind of a blockage. But the good thing is that with the enterprise backup, since this is a community version, we are not using enterprise backup, but with the enterprise software, enterprise MariaDB software, the backup is now non-blocking. So it does create a lock still, but those are very minimum blocks and should not impact your application in any way. So now we are going to follow the best practices, and we are going to create a backup from the slave node instead of disturbing the master. So I'm going to increase the size a little bit over here. So if you look at it, we are in the root folder, so it's fine, it doesn't matter. We are going to create a new folder called backup, and within backup we are going to create a new folder for today's date, mkdir. Today is 08 and 7, so today is 7th July, so I'm going to create a folder with that name. And if I look at it, we have the folder already created. That's all I need. Now what I need to do is I need to do MariaBackup, and then let's clear this script. So I need to do a MariaBackup minus backup. So this is the first argument that we are telling this MariaBackup to actually trigger a backup process, so it's going to backup. And then the second argument would be target dir, target directory. So this target directory is basically supposed to point to our folder where we want to take a backup, right? So that is under root backup folder. Let me see if the path is correct. Yeah, so indeed I'm under root. So I'm going to see the actual folder name. So yeah, MariaBackup minus backup and minus target dir equals to /root/backup /2020 08/07. So that's my target directory where I want to keep a backup. And the next thing is the username, of course. So the user is my DB user that I created earlier, so that's the username is backup, of course. And finally the password. My password is password, of course, so I'm just going to use the same. So once we press enter, it will start the backup process immediately. So during this time, the server can be busy, the server can be creating new transaction. That's not a problem. Let's do that. All right, so this is my primary node. Let's do a very quick script. MariaDB show databases. Okay, so I have a test DB already there. Use test DB show table. So I have a table called tab. Select star from tab, limit 10, for example. Okay, so it's a very simple table. That's good. So I'm going to create a new SQL file, pi load.sql, for example. So what I'm going to do here is use test DB and insert into tab, and let's say C1 column, and values I'm just going to insert some random integer, random times 1000, or maybe something bigger. Yeah, I think this should be fine. So if I exit from here and I do a watch MySQL, or rather MariaDB minus e load.sql. so if I run it through watch, so watch basically is, or maybe we'll add in some additional parameter minus n1. So every second, or let's say every half a second, is going to call this load.sql function through MariaDB with a minus e argument. So is minus e is to execute this, or I think minus e is not required, so I think we will do this. Yeah, let's see, minus e is required here, and then we will put it in a double quote. So execute this script, whatever this is, every 0.5 seconds. So if let's run it and see if my GTID gets increased. Yeah, indeed, so it's already working, and then my GTIDs are increasing now, so meaning this load is generating data, and that's basically inserting some transactions. So it doesn't matter where my server is, so I can just run MariaBackup Let's see. All right, so my backup is already done very quickly. So it is telling me that my backup is based on this particular GTID, right? So the backup is consistent as of this particular transaction ID 331. Now we can see that of course my GTIDs are already moving, and they will continue to move forever until I stop the script. So we will not do that, we will let it run. So now let's quickly go to that folder and see what's inside. So if you look at it, this is basically a copy of your data directory. So whatever existed in your data directory is actually copied here. But our point of interest is this particular file, extra backup binlog info file. So if we do a cat of this file, this will tell us the same thing that we saw in this backup output. It is going to tell us my binlog file name and my binlog position, and of course my GTID. So it's telling me that this particular backup is as of this particular GTID. So this means that when we use this backup on a slave node on a third new server, we need to set that server's GTID to this particular number. So once that is done, this server should start requesting data from this GTID onwards. So it doesn't matter where my current GTID is, it's fine as long as we have a backup properly created, and then we have this extra backup binlog info file which tells us what's my GTID. That's all we need basically. Okay, so the backup is ready. Now what we need to do is we need to push this backup to our new server. I believe my new server is already started. Yes, so the 73 should be already running. It's an empty server with just MariaDB installed. So what we need to do is I'm going to go back here and I'm going to do SCP. So very simple method of transferring file. So I'm going to SCP. I need to do a -r for recursive SCP. I'm going to push it to root user at 192.168.56.73 and which folder, let's say /root, right? So, or if you have another folder that is already created there, so we can push it there, but in this case I'm going to push it to my root user. Right, I think that's all there is. So let's press enter. Yes, so it's asking for the first time authentication, and it's going to ask for the root password, and yeah, the files are getting transferred, and then the files are already transferred there. So if I should be able to split another window, and I'm going to go to this 73 server, and if I do a check on the home folder, I should see that folder created here just now, right? So if I do a time check, it's just on the same particular time. So that backup is created here, CD 2020, and then yes, everything is there. So again, we'll take a quick check at this file. All good. All right, so so we have a MariaDB server already running here. Of course, if we do a quick check on the data directory is the same, the standard one. We did not change anything. So the first thing to do would be to systemctl stop MariaDB. So first thing is to stop your process MariaDB server, and then go to, and then the second thing is rm-rf. This is the scary part. rm-rf var lib mysql/star. So we have to remove all the contents of the data directory. Don't remove the data directory itself, but remove the contents of the data directory. So that's what we are going to do. I know it's scary, but the thing is that this is a new server, of course, and then we don't really need to worry about the data that already exists. Even if it's an old server, you are trying to sync it up with your primary server, of course, so it's okay to remove it because the data will come from my backup folder. So we are going to remove all the contents now. Yes, I want to remove. All right, so all the files are removed. So if I do a quick check while lib mysql. Yeah, the folder is empty right now. So now that we have a backup already here, now we will run the backup one more time, but in this case we are going to run it slightly different. So MariaBackup. So remember last time we did a backup as our first parameter, but now in this case we are going to do a prepare. So this prepare is a step that is required before you restore it, before you restore your database. Basically, you can do that on this server where you took the backup, or you can do it after you copy it over, and then you can do the prepare over there. It doesn't really matter. So what this step does is, this step will do another round of verification of your backup. That is the one thing it does. And then the second thing it does is basically commit all those pending transactions that might be in-flight transaction at the time when we took a backup, because remember we are running this script that is constantly generating data on our server, and while this was running we took a backup. Our load may not be high enough, but in case of a busy server, this is very important. So regardless whether your server is busy or not busy, we have to do this prepare step, so that it will make your data files or InnoDB IBD files in a consistent state. Because at the moment, if we use this data as it is, this backup data as it is, the server may not be able to start. So we need to make sure that we have a consistent data directory before we do. So that's what this prepare is going to do. So we will run this prepare step followed by my target dir, same parameter, but in this case we are going to point it to our backup directory where our backup currently exists on this particular server. So root, and I think in this case it's directly under root 0807. I think that's all that is required for the prepare step. So you don't need a user ID, you don't need a password, just simply prepare and then the target directory. That's all. All right, so prepare is completed. You can see that the final status is okay. Just verify that there are no more errors or nothing like that. Yes. Yeah, you can see here it is basically doing a recovery, initiating a recovery, because the copy that we have of this data directory is while the server was still running, right? So if you have a copy of the database when the server is down, then this recovery is not needed. You can use that data directory as it is. But since we are using MariaBackup and MariaBackup runs on a live server, the recovery is needed. Right, so yeah, so you can see here it's basically doing a recovery of your data. So any transaction that may be in flight are committed, and is doing a crash recovery, all those things. So it assumes that your database crashed, and then it does a recovery, and then basically commits all those pending transactions, commits or rollbacks all those pending transactions depending on what it is supposed to be. All right, so my prepare is done. Now we are ready to restore this backup. So remember, we have already cleaned up our data directory, our original data directory of this server. Now we should be ready to restore back. So I'm using the same command, but instead of prepare, we are going to do a copy back. Right, so copy back means that we are going to copy all the contents of this target directory to our data directory. So our data directory is going to be data directory is equal to, so if you are using the default, you don't need to specify this parameter, but I think it's always best practice to specify this. So regardless of you have a custom data directory or you have a default data directory, you can always specify it. So var lib mysql, that is my default data directory. So again, for copy back, I don't need to specify a user and a password, right? So only when taking a backup you need that, but when copying back or prepare, you don't need that. So let's do that. Okay, so I think there's some issue. Oh yeah, sorry, so there's no hyphen in the data directory. I confused it with the target directory. Yeah, this should work. Okay, that's all. We are already done. So now you see the backup copyback is completed. So the status depends on this last line. So if you get an OK, it would mean that your process was completed successfully. Okay. Now we see that our GTID has moved way past our backup GTID, right? Okay, so now one more time we are going to cat this file, cat, and then we are going to take note of this number, and then we are going to connect to not really connect. Okay, yeah, so of course I forgot. So there's one more thing, one more very important step. So now our copyback is done. So let's take a quick look at var lib mysql folder. Okay, so everything looks good. We have all the files here that are required, but something that is not so good is the ownership of all those files. So all those files are currently being owned by root user. Why is that? Because we run the restore process or copyback process using the root user, and that's why the ownership now belongs to root. So always whenever you restore back, you have to set the ownership to MySQL. So MySQL is the user that the files should be owned by. So that's what we're going to do. chown -r. Okay, sorry about that. Somebody messaged me, which I don't want to see. So change on -r MySQL. So the user and the group should be MySQL, and we want to put the folder name var lib MySQL. Yeah, that's all. So everything within that folder, including the MySQL user, should now be owned by MySQL user now. Okay, so now yes, we can see that they are owned by MySQL user, which is good. And now we should be able to start our server. Systemctl start MariaDB, and yes, we didn't get any error message, which is a good news. So again, I'm going to go back to my backup folder 2020 and cat this one more time to get this number. All right, so we are going to connect to MariaDB now and show slave status. So there's no slave status because this is a fresh install, so it's just a fresh restore, so it's not a slave to anybody right now. So what's next? The next is, again, we will now from this point onwards you can follow the same steps as we did when we set up the basic replication. The only difference is that if you remember previously we did set global GTID slave position equals to empty string, right? So instead of setting this to empty string, now we need to use that number, the number we got from the extra backup build log info file. So this means that we are telling this particular node that we want you to start from this particular GTID, start requesting data from this particular GTID from the master, meaning whichever master we configure, we are telling this guy to start pulling data from this GTID onwards. All right, so now the next step is, of course, you guessed it right, we are going to do a change master command one time for this node. Change master to master host. Again, the same thing, 192.168.56.71 is my master, and master port I don't need to give because we are using the default port. So this change master command will assume that it's a default port, and then it will use it accordingly. And my user is replication user, and my password is the default password. And of course the most important one would be master use GTID equals to slave position. So remember previously we asked this node to start from the current position, and because we have set the set this position to empty. So we are asking it to start from the current position, meaning wherever you are right now, start from that location. So your current position is empty, but in this case, since we have set it up with a specific GTID, we are asking it to start from the slave position. So wherever your slave is right now, so the slave is of course at a certain position, which is this number. So you can start replicating from this position onwards. So let's see if this works. I hope the password is still the same. Let's see. All right. uh, so now you see that we are starting from this GTID, but my GTID on the server is already way ahead, right? 2211 2159 or something, and it's constantly moving. So it's a real world scenario. So we'll do a start slave and see if my slave is started successfully. Okay, yes, indeed, we can see that it's already caught up to those numbers, and then we see that there are no more errors reported, or no errors reported at all. So my replication seems to be working great. We do a refresh again, and then we can see that that number is increasing, right? So that's all we wanted to see, that my replication is working fine. So we did a backup from a live server, the live server that is constantly getting some new data every half a second, and then we took a backup on a particular GTID, and then we restored back, and then we asked MariaDB to start replicating from that particular number, and then it's able to sync up. So this is the way. Now you can use this backup and add more nodes, and you can use the same GTID, of course, as the starting position. Sorry, there are jets flying over, so it's a national day coming up, so there are some noise on the outside. Anyway, so yeah, so you can use this backup and create multiple slaves as of now, but remember that we are using a specific GTID, right? So if let's say that GTID does not exist on the master node anymore, we cannot use that backup. So we will have to create a new backup from the master, and then use that backup to replicate onto new nodes. So why would it happen that the GTID is no longer available on the server? So if you remember, there is a parameter called log expire days. So that parameter currently by default is set to 0. I think so. Let's verify. Show variables like expire, I think so, yeah. So expire log days, not log expire days, is expire log days is set to 0. So 0 means unlimited, meaning the logs will never expire. So this means that the logs on my master node will never expire. They will be there as long as the disk allows them to be. So in this scenario, we can possibly use the same backup even in the future, as long as the logs are available. But if let's say you're doing some housekeeping on those logs, and maybe removing the old logs to, maybe maybe you have this parameter set up for 7 days, right? So if you use this backup, 7 days later you may not get that data, the data that you are looking for. So the logs may have already been purged from the system. So your replication that is trying to request for some transaction, that those bin logs may not be available anymore. So just keep and watch on that. So in case of that scenario, you may need to take a fresh backup from the master or a slave node if you want to set up new nodes on the cluster. All right, so now this is done. Let's do a quick change on my max scale, etc/maxscale.cnf file. Of course, we will have to add one more replica. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this and we'll paste it, and then I'm just going to call it as replica number 2, and just simply change this IP to 73. The rest, everything remains the same. And then of course in the monitor section, we want to add that replica 2 as well, replica 2. And of course for my read and write splitting section, I will add that read replica 2 as well. Unless you don't want that here, you only want the read and write splitting between these two nodes, then yeah, you can just leave it as it is. But just to show you guys, um, replica2 replica 2. That's all. I'll save and exit, restart. Okay, I don't have a restart max scale. systemctl restart max scale, and let's do a watch, and yep, there it is. So now you can see the third node is already there, the read replica 2 on this particular IP, and then this also getting constantly in sync with the rest of the cluster. Right, I think we can stop this guy now. You don't need to load any more data. Okay, yeah, I think that's all there is. So it's a very simple process. Just need to create a new user account with a specific grants for the backup, and then just call MariaBackup to take a backup of that database, and then copy that over to the new server where you want to restore it. That server may or may not have a database already there. So regardless of uh, the situation, you will still need to delete uh, the contents of the data directory, stop the server, delete the contents of the data directory, run the prepare step, MariaBackup prepare, and then run copy back, and then change ownership to MySQL user of the data directory, all the files and in the folders recursively, and then just start the server and log into the server and set the current GTID, or rather the GTID slave position, to the specific backup position, and then just run the change master command. That's all there is. Very simple process. I hope you guys like this. Enjoy, guys. Bye.